Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Sushma Jansari. I'm South Asia curator here at the British Museum and lead curator of the new exhibition, Ancient India Living Traditions. The show is now open, which is very exciting, and it runs until the 19th of October. It's a really great run, and I really hope you're able to come and see it in person. It is a multi-sensory delight. This evening, very excitingly, I'm joined by Kajal Meghani, who's the exhibition project curator, and we would like to welcome you to our curator's introduction, where we'll go through the key themes and object highlights with you all. Thank you so much for joining us to celebrate this exhibition. I'm going to be introducing the exhibition and sharing the nature spirits, Jain art, and part of the Buddhist art sections with you. And Gajal will pick up the story in the Buddhist art section and go through the Hindu art and beyond India sections before moving on to the very uplifting concluding section. There's going to be about 5 minutes for questions at the end of the talk, so do please submit your questions in the chat, and Gajal and I will see those once we have finished our talks. So, Ancient India Living Traditions explores the origins of representations of Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist deities and enlightened teachers in the powerful nature spirits and divine serpents of ancient India. The art of these religions share many similarities and, of course, some key differences. And it was between about 200 BCE and about 600 CE that many of the sacred images we recognize today took shape and began to spread to Central Asia, East Asia, and Southeast Asia. And this is very much the core story running through the exhibition. As you can see on the slide, the exhibition itself is organised in the following sections. There's nature spirits, Jain art, Buddhist art, Hindu art, beyond India, and the conclusion. And I think what's really exciting about this exhibition is that alongside this core story of ancient devotional art, there are three strands that support and enhance it in many different ways. The next slide. So one of these strands is provenance. Our visitors want to know where the objects on display are from and how they got to the British Museum. And I want to know this too. So collecting histories is actually a key area of my own research into the South Asia collections. And I'm currently co-supervising a PhD student who is researching women collectors represented among the South Asia collections. And hint, there are a lot. In the research I did in the run-up to applying for and getting collaborative funding for this project, I found that fully 1/3 of the South Asia collection was contributed by women. And another of the PhD students I co-supervised is in fact Kajal Meghani herself, who's recently submitted her thesis, which is very exciting. And she was investigating South Asian contributors to the British Museum, and there are about 150 of them. And what's really fantastic is that Gajal was able to integrate some of her research into the exhibition, and she'll be able to answer those kind of questions in the Q&A session today. We've actually included information about the provenance of every single object in the exhibition as far as possible, given the archival information available here in the UK and abroad that we've been able to consult. The second strand, as you can see on the screen, looks at contemporary Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain practice here in the UK today. This aspect is shared in a few different ways. So one is through 4 films in 4 sections of the exhibition, which showcase the stories of practicing Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains. Another is the display of 3 devotional sculptures loaned to us by some of our wonderful community partners. And we also include large photos of the Ganesh Chaturthi festival in front of the Royal Liver building in Liverpool, and also traditionally built temples here in the UK. So there's the Oswald Derasa or Jain temple in Potter's Bar and the Thai Buddhist temple in Wimbledon. So these modern temples house modern consecrated sculptures of gods and enlightened teachers. And the artistic origins of these sculptures and the structures that house them reach back thousands and thousands of years, and they are now part of our shared cultural heritage here in the UK today. And the third section, the third strand, is connected to our community advisory panel and our organisational partners. So, as soon as this exhibition was given the go ahead, I worked with Kate McSweeney of the British Museum's Communities team to convene a group of UK based practicing Hindus, Buddhists, and Jains. And we worked really closely together, meeting regularly at the museum and also locations such as Neasden Temple and the Oshwell Temple. And at the very start of our conversations, we focused on building trust between us as a real foundation for our collaboration. And while that was going on, we set up conversations around particular subjects such as exhibition design, retail, etc. And we didn't know exactly what the outcomes of these were going to be. And it was really important that these were very open discussions so we could explore what was most important for our community partners and also what was possible. So our conversations, I think it's fair to say, were quite robust and exciting. And we talked about all manner of things related to the exhibition, from retail offer to design, to how sculptures were handled and conserved, the provenance of the sacred sculptures and other devotional art, and so many other things. We listened, we discussed, we explored opportunities, and most importantly, we approached this as a true collaboration and put as much as we possibly could into practice. Some of the outcomes are possibly, quite unexpected for all of us, and we've shared some of these with our visitors through labels in the exhibition itself. So reasons why it's a bright, colourful exhibitions, including woodblock printing as part of the design, commissioning music from British South Asian tabla player and composer Dalbir Singh Ratan, the soundscape of nature and temple sounds woven through the exhibition, the scent of sacred sandalwood pervading the exhibition, and the four films that I mentioned. And for me, I think these aspects are the living and breathing heart of the exhibition. And Kajal and I will be sharing some of these aspects during the lecture. So now let's move on to, well, into the past. So when you actually enter the exhibition, you are greeted by three sacred images of Ganesh, the Buddha, and a Jain Tirthankara, which is an enlightened teacher. And in front of them, as you can see in this slide, is a floor-to-ceiling banner printed with images of people venerating the sacred sculptures, as you can see through it. And this is really key because I really wanted visitors to immediately recognize three things: that this exhibition is about three religions, that these are all living religions, and people still venerate the sacred sculptures that we will see in the exhibition. And also, this is a really bright, vibrant exhibition full of colour, which really reflects the vital importance of colour in all of these religious traditions. And hopefully, the bright colours and the sound will encourage conversation and reflection all the way through the show. So, the nature spirit section, which was where we're going to start, is really filled with the thrum of the generative power of nature, with male and female nature spirits, divine serpents, and animal headed deities who harness and wield the awesome power of nature. This section tells the story of how these were among the earliest deities to be shaped into stone and terracotta sculptures and venerated in the subcontinent. And the imagery influenced later religious art, and these nature spirits were believed to be so powerful and important in people's lives that they were incorporated into Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism in lots of different ways. And although this story is, of course, much older, this part of the exhibition begins in India in about 200 BCE. And at this time, India was covered in dense forests and rich agricultural land, watered by immense rivers and the monsoon rains. Most people lived in rural communities and believed powerful nature spirits inhabited the world around them, influencing their lives and the success or failure of harvests. And to really evoke the idea and sense of nature, we went for a multi-sensory experience, unlike anything you will have experienced at the British Museum before. You'll hear the sounds of nature, rustling leaves, rainwater, birds calling, and you will see many shades of green that make up the Indian landscape and the rich red earth. And you'll also smell sacred sandalwood that has become part of ritual practice for all of the faiths practiced in this exhibition. And these aspects are not merely the backdrop to the sacred objects that you will see on display, but they're an integral part of the experience of encountering the art. And this is because so many of the devotional sculptures on display would have been venerated outside. And often sculptures of different sizes were placed next to or under trees, and smaller terracotta plaques were tied onto tree trunks. Just going to have a sip of water. So I want to share four stories with you from this section of the exhibition, and most have ancient and contemporary connections. Yakshas, as you can see in this particular slide, are male nature spirits associated with trees, mountains, bodies of water, and wealth. And devotees placated such deities, some with very frightening expressions, you can see in the slide, with offerings, hoping to receive blessings in return. And in the exhibition, there are three depictions of Kuber, the king of the Yakshas, a life-size image of the colossal stone sculpture that might represent Kuber stands more than 3 meters in height. And imagine walking through a forest and encountering him. He isn't smiling in a very welcoming way. Instead, he really stops you in your tracks with his very direct expression. And this much smaller sandstone sculpture of the same god is on loan from the V&A, and it was made about 500 years after the colossal statue. And he's carrying a cup here, and it was probably filled with alcohol. And alcohol used to be offered to some gods in the ancient past. And he's also holding a bag of money. In fact, Kubera is also the god of wealth, and a fact that is emphasized by the fact he's got a lovely rounded pot belly and he's wearing plentiful jewelry. And you'll see that I've displayed him alongside a mound of coins and also a lamp that has coins attached to it. And when you visit the exhibition and look closely at them, you'll see that they depict not only Kubera, but also Lakshmi, the goddess of good fortune. Now, these are obviously not very ancient, the coins and the lamp, but actually they're very contemporary because I purchased them specifically for the exhibition, and I donated some of the coins and the lamp to the museum's collection. And I included these alongside the ancient sculpture of Kuber because I wanted to show that this god is still very much part of Hindu rituals today, and he's often venerated alongside Lakshmi. And speaking of Lakshmi, the next works of devotional art I want to share with you depict Gajal Lakshmi, which means elephant Lakshmi. Now, the goddess Lakshmi has incredibly ancient Yakshi origins and is one of the most popular deities in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism. And what is a Yakshi, I hear you ask? Well, Yakshis are powerful female nature spirits who are able to bestow abundance and fertility, as well as death and disease. And they are depicted as full figured, bejeweled women, often standing by fruit or blossom laden trees, or sitting on and holding flowers. Now, this basalt lintel, which is at the back in this slide, is from a Buddhist cave site and dates to about 200 BCE. And here, Gaja Lakshmi sits on a fully blown lotus flower, and elephants are pouring water over her from pitchers they are holding in their trunks. And their dark bodies symbolize monsoon clouds filled with much anticipated rainwater, ready to bring the earth back to life. And this is incredibly perhaps the earliest image of Gaja Lakshmi in sculptural form, which comes from the Buddhist Pitalkora caves in Maharashtra. And we are very fortunate because our wonderful partners at CSMVS Museum in Mumbai very generously loaned this sculpture to us. Now, I think, this artwork so successfully conveys the message of abundance and fertility that representations have actually changed very little over thousands of years. I could have displayed alongside this sculpture a popular print or a calendar that I could have purchased from a local shop, um, because the imagery is identical even today. But instead, I chose a really beautiful painting from the museum's collections, and it dates to about 1780. And it's also on the back of the exhibition catalogue because I love it so very much. And I think the enduring nature of some of this imagery over many thousands of years is really quite extraordinary when you just sit back and think about that for a second. And the story doesn't stop here, but continues with divine serpents. So, Nagas and Naganis are male and female divine snakes who control the life giving waters. These nature spirits grant wealth, fertility, and protection, but they're also ambivalent. They can also kill with a single bite. Divine snakes are amongst the most ancient deities to be venerated in India, and they're usually depicted as many headed, rearing cobras. And even when they are depicted in human form, they retain some snake like features, such as a cobra tail or cobra hoods. And Manasa, who you can see in this slide here, is a snake goddess venerated by Buddhists and Hindus alike for her ability to provide prosperity, children, and protection from snakes. And like other nature spirits, she's ambivalent and can cause harm with her deadly snake bite. Manasa is often represented as a beautiful woman surrounded by snakes, and she usually holds a serpent, or in the case of this bronze sculpture here, a child sitting on her lap. And this sculpture dates to about 750 CE and comes from Eastern India, but she's still venerated today. And you can see vibrant skull paintings like the one in this slide and on display in the exhibition, which was made in Calcutta about 2006. And they're used by traveling storytellers to share her story with devotees. So, the fourth and last type of nature spirit that I'm going to share with you this evening are those that were depicted with the bodies of humans and the heads of animals, such as lions or elephants. And as you probably might expect, they share lots of yaksha features with their squat bodies and those lovely rounded pot bellies that are associated with good fortune. This sandstone sculpture depicts a lion-faced spirit, and he's another very generous loan from CSMVS Museum in Mumbai. And we actually don't know a great deal about him, but my exhibition book co-author, Dr. Suresh Kumar Muthukumaran, made a wonderful discovery as we were doing a research for the book. And while looking through the British Museum's collections, he noticed that the lion-headed god is also found in a Buddhist context. And in fact, it's in this sculpture from Sarnath, where the Buddha preached his first sermon. And you can see the Buddha meditating, and Mara, the personification of death and worldly temptation. He's trying to stop him meditating and therefore from preventing the Buddha's enlightenment by sending his army to distract him. And part of this army is our lion faced deity with his finger raised up in a menacing fashion. And I'm going to move on to the next section of the exhibition, which is a serene golden creamy colour, and it focuses on Jain art. Now, Jainism emerged more than 2,500 years ago at about the same time as Buddhism, and Jains follow the teachings of 24 enlightened teachers who are human, not divine, important distinction, and each teacher has a male and female nature spirit attendant. Jains also worship some gods, such as Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, and also non-violence is really central to the Jain faith. So, Jain art focuses on representations of the 24 enlightened teachers, and the earliest certain depictions of these enlightened teachers in human form were carved in beautiful mottled pink sandstone about 2,000 years ago in the ancient city of Mathura in northern India. And this is a really important moment because it marked a major moment of innovation in Indian sacred art. And they were partly inspired by depictions of nature spirits. Now, the Tatankas, the enlightened teachers themselves, were and still are only shown in two distinct meditation postures that you can see in this slide. They're either seated in the lotus position or they're standing in the upright, dismissing the body pose. They often have the Srivatsa symbol in the middle of their chest, which is an endless knot symbol, and that helps us to differentiate them from images of the Buddha. And although prototypes of these early Jain images are unknown, similarities suggest that artists drew on pre-existing depictions of yakshas and nagas to shape them. Now, in Jain stories, divine snakes play a protective role, and these find artistic expression in representations of the Tirthankara Parshvanath, for example. Now, in this exceptional loan from the V&A, you can see Parshvanath sitting deep in meditation when a malevolent being sent torrential rain, perhaps represented by the clapping hands above his head, sorry, about the storm clouds above his head, and a host of spirits to disturb his meditation. And the serpent, Taranendra, protected Parshvanath with his snakehoods, as you can see in this beautiful sculpture. And also part of the sculpture, you can see just to one side of the Tirthankara, you can see Padmavati, the queen of snakes, who's holding a parasol above the Tirthankara's head. And she herself also has a smaller canopy of snakes around her own head. And above the whole scene, you can see celestial music represented by hands playing the drums and also heavenly garland bearers as well. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that we work very closely with our community partners on lots of different aspects related to this exhibition. And at the start of the Jain section, I also noted that non-violence is a key aspect of this faith. And this refers to non-violence to all living creatures. Now, one of the things we discussed together was the possibility of using materials in the exhibition that didn't use any animal-derived products. And we committed to doing this as far as possible. And to give you an example, all of the paint we used in the exhibition is completely vegan. And the museum's publishing team took up this challenge as well. And for the first time, the exhibition book is also vegan, as you can see here. Now, we are now into the bright orange section and looking at Buddhist art. Now, this part of the exhibition focuses on sculptures from what used to be a magnificent stupa at Amaravati. And this stupa was one of many stupas and monasteries built along the Krishna River and its tributaries in Andhra in southeastern India. A stupa, just to say, is a shrine built over sacred relics. And a key story told in this particular section is the change in the way that the Buddha was depicted in art. Now, there's an incredible two-sided panel from Amaravati Stupa that helps to tell this story. The oldest and original side was carved in about the mid-first century BCE, and here you can see the Buddha. And it's the large panel in the middle of this slide. You're probably thinking, I'm pretty sure she's wrong because I don't see the Buddha anywhere. Well, actually, during this early period time, the Buddha was shown symbolically through sacred symbols, and you can see devotees venerating a tree, an empty throne, a parasol, and footprints beneath the throne. And about 300 years later, in about 250 CE, during a major renovation of this sacred shrine, this panel was turned over and recarved and rededicated. And this time you can see on the right-hand side that the Buddha is shown in human form and he's standing at the stupa entrance. Now, what's really interesting is that, as with the depictions of the Jain enlightened teachers, these early representations of the Buddha in human form take inspiration from early images of nature spirits. Now, most obviously, as you can see here, he's got his right hand raised in blessing. And having gone through this bit, at this point, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Kajal Meghani, who's going to pick up the story with collecting histories and provenance and take us through to the end of the exhibition.
Great. Thank you, Sushma. Um, as Sushma mentioned at the beginning of this talk, we were keen to understand the origins and the journey of the many sacred images on display. And we found some truly fascinating and often complex stories that reveal just how far these objects have traveled and how rich their histories really are. An example of such is the sculptures from the Amaravati Stupa site, where we have a whole case, which you see here, examining the provenance of these sculptures. Using drawings and photographs, this section of the exhibition tells the complicated and multifaceted story of the stupa's rediscovery and then dispersal at the hands of many people, including a local Indian ruler and several British colonial officials. The Great Shrine at Amaravati was rediscovered in the late 18th century by workers employed by the local landowner, Raja Vesireddy Naidu. They were instructed to reuse stones from the monument to build a new town for the ruler. This led to the destruction of the whole dome, and a reservoir was planned for the center of the shrine. Colin Mackenzie, an officer of the East India Company, visited the stupa during this time and sketched a plan of the remaining site, including the planned reservoir, which you can see on the left of the screen. He also dug up some sculptures. Later, other British officials excavated the Amaravati stupa, removing many of the sculptures and transporting them to Madras, which is now Chennai. Here they were beautifully drawn by Tamil artist Murugesan Mudalia, an example of which you can see in the center. Mudalia's drawings were sent to the directors of the East India Company in London so that they could decide if they wanted any of the sculptures. During this time, many of the sculptures were kept outside in India, leading to damage. Eventually, some were sent to the company's India Museum in London, and most became part of the newly opened Government Museum in Madras. Unfortunately, the East India Company's museum closed by the time the sculptures from Amaravati arrived in London, leading to more erosion. Eventually, they were transferred to the British Museum. A comparison between Medalia's drawings and the sculptures on display showed the damaging impact of keeping these sculptures outside in Madras and London. On the screen here, you can see Medalia's drawing of a sculpture depicting Vajrapani in the center, which was done in about 1854, and the same sculpture as it looks today on the right. Comparing the two, it is possible to see how much detail has since been lost. The Amaravati sculptures at the British Museum are now kept in a specially conditioned environment. The next section of the exhibition focuses on Hindu art. Hinduism, numerous religious traditions that share diverse beliefs, philosophies, and practices that have evolved throughout India over thousands of years. Hinduism is shaped by sacred texts such as the Vedas, Upanishads, Ramayana, and Mahabharata, and its teachings emphasize the four aims of life: dharma, which means righteous duty; artha, prosperity; kama, desires; and moksha, the liberation from the cycle of rebirth. This section of the exhibition explores the representation of Hindu gods and goddesses. As with Jain and Buddhist enlightened teachers, around 2,000 years ago, Hindu deities also began to be depicted in human form, and they too incorporated imagery inspired by nature. On the right, you can see a 5th century sculpture in red sandstone of Vishnu, the god who preserved order on earth. Here, Vishnu is depicted in his third avatar of Varaha, rescuing the goddess Bu, the personification of earth, on his shoulder. Varaha's pose was possibly inspired by the sight of wetland living clods of earth with their tusks, searching for tubers. And so through these images, it is possible to see how ancient India's flora and fauna inspired artisans creating these images. Hindu gods have long been represented symbolically and venerated through natural features found in the landscape. This fossilized ammonite, garnet seal, and sandstone plaque use symbols to represent Vishnu. Some Hindus believe that the fossilized ammonites found in the Kali Gandaki River in Nepal are naturally occurring forms of the god Vishnu, symbolizing a chakra, his discus-shaped weapon. This weapon can also be seen on the right side of the garnet seal, along with the conch shell on the left of the seal. The trident in the center represents Shiva. The sandstone plaque also has a conch shell along with a club carved on the left and right-hand side. These symbols help devotees identify the footprints as belonging to Vishnu. The practice of depicting Hindu gods and goddesses symbolically through natural elements continues into the present day. About 2,000 years ago, Hindu gods and goddesses began to be depicted in human form, incorporating some earlier nature spirit imagery with additions such as multiple arms to hold specific sacred objects. This early bronze image of a goddess in the center has many features in common with Yakshis, the female nature spirit, which you can see an example of on the left, including a floral headdress, plentiful jewelry, and full figure. Two of the bronze goddess's arms are now broken at the shoulders, and one hand is missing the attribute it once held, so it's no longer possible to identify this goddess. On the right, you can see Lakshmi from a home shrine in the UK, shown in the film in this section of this exhibition. Like the terracotta Yakshi and the bronze goddess, she wears copious jewelry and an elaborate headdress. And through these images, it is possible to see the continuation of nature spirit imagery into the modern day. Between about 320 and 550 CE, brick and stone temples which housed images of deities were built. These spectacular temples were decorated with intricate carvings as well as narrative panels that share stories from Indian epic poems such as the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. The ornamental bricks on the left adorned the columns and decorative panels of the smaller pyramid-shaped terrace temple in the ancient Ahichatra in western Uttar Pradesh. Dedicated to the god Shiva and built during the Gupta period, it is one of the finest examples of brick temples to survive. This temple was excavated by Dr. Aloy A. Fura of the Archaeological Survey of India, who was known for conducting substandard excavations. Between 1891 and 1892, Fura removed some of the ornamental bricks and narrative panels that decorated this temple, depositing them in the Lucknow Museum, Uttar Pradesh. In 1901, 25 bricks were given to the British Museum by Lord George Francis Hamilton, the Secretary of State for India, on behalf of the British Government of India. The next section of the exhibition shifts the focus beyond India. Although few Jain images from ancient India have been found outside of India, Buddhist and Hindu devotional art spread along sea and land-based and East Asia. Sacred imagery and religious ideas from India were adopted and adapted to merge with local beliefs and styles, producing unique depictions of Buddhist and Hindu deities and enlightened teachers. Enough core features were retained to enable devotees from different regions and cultures to still recognize the gods and teachers depicted. For example, in the center of this section of the exhibition, you can see 3 depictions of the Buddha preaching in between bodhisattvas. Buddhist art from the ancient province of Gandhara in present-day Pakistan was a source of artistic inspiration in neighboring Central Asia and even Japan. Taking a closer look at these, you can see similarities in the composition of these 3 sacred images from 3 different places. The sculpture in the center shows the Buddha preaching in between 2 bodhisattvas. Below them, there are 2 kneeling devotees. It comes from the Jamalgari Stupa now in Pakistan and dates to about the 2nd or 3rd century. The vivid painting on the left comes from Dunhuang in China and dates to about the first half of the 8th century. Again, you see the Buddha preaching. He is flanked by bodhisattvas as well as monk disciples, and there is a female donor figure in the bottom left. On the right, you can see a 19th century copy of a wall painting dating to the 7th century CE, produced after Buddhism took root in Japan from about 500 CE. This drawing possibly depicts Murku, the Buddha of the future, sitting on a lotus throne flanked by bodhisattvas, celestial kings, and monks. We also see Ganesh appear in different contexts and geographies. The painted wall fragment on the left dates to the 6th century CE and was excavated from a site called Kadalik on the southern Silk Road in the early 20th century. He holds an elephant prod and sweets, and this fragment was found in a large Buddhist shrine alongside a depiction of the Buddha. Ganesha was also part of the first religious landscape. This Javanese sculpture is made of volcanic stone and dates to about 1000 to 1200 CE. Here, Ganesha has some traditional Indian features, such as the broken tusk, axe, and prayer beads. But Javanese artists often depict him with skull ornaments and carrying an empty bowl instead of sweets. In addition, they usually show him seated in a childlike pose with his feet facing one another as they are here. All of these features combine to suggest various communities understood and worshipped him differently. The conclusion of the exhibition brings visitors back to the modern day, but it's also a full circle moment and displays contemporary sacred images depicting the Buddha, Ganesh, and a Tirthankara. Today, almost 2 billion people practice Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism globally, and movements of people have carried these religious traditions and sacred images beyond South Asia. The arrival of South Asian, East Asian, and Southeast Asian diaspora communities means that this devotional art of these three religions and many others are now part of our British cultural. Our community partners have generously loaned 3 sculptures to us for the exhibition. The golden Buddha on the left was made in Thailand and blessed by Buddhist monks. Before being installed in the Buddha Padipa temple in Wimbledon, where it has been venerated by members of the local Thai Buddhist community and other visitors to this beautiful temple. The golden dancing Ganesh in the center was purchased in 2007 by the founder of London-based wedding and events company Om Creatives for his sister's wedding, and since then it has graced many celebrations in the UK. And the painted marble sculpture of the Jain Tirthankara, or enlightened teacher Parshvanath, on the right was commissioned and made in Shankeshwar, Gujarat, in India, which is an important place of pilgrimage. It was made for the purpose of veneration in a household here in London. These have been displayed with banners showing the veneration of similar images in the UK. And in this way, these sculptures bring the story that started with 3 ancient sacred images all the way to the present day, and reflect the presence of these religions and religious communities here in the UK today. And the celebration exhibition, it also continues into the exhibition gift shop. Here, our retail team worked with our community partners to source items from South Asian and British South Asian businesses and artisans where possible. You can see one of the sessions on the right, where the retail team shared some of their designs to our partners. Working with our learning and programs team, we also worked with a range of people to develop additional ways of experiencing the exhibition. On the left, you can see a sensory trail bag that was created in collaboration with the Asian People's Disability Alliance, a user-led charity that provides culturally sensitive support and services based in Brent, Greater London. Here, we worked with our partners to select sacred images from the exhibition that they wish to explore through their senses, through items such as scent pots and bells. Some items in the bag were also donated by members of the Asian People's Disability Alliance, along with saris and fabrics that were stitched to create the bag itself. Partners and the museum's incredible volunteers, which you can see objects such as bells and the ornamental feet used to represent a god, that would allow visitors to experience the exhibition through some of the more ritual aspects of the 3 religions. In the photograph, you see the volunteers and visitors looking at a snakes and ladders game, which was hand-stitched by female master artisans in Kutch, Gujarat, using block prints and naturally dyed. Rooted in Indian spirituality and adapted over centuries, the game's original virtues and snakes, known as vices. To conclude, this really has been a brief overview, and there's so much more in the exhibition to experience, and something you can only really experience in person. The exhibition really gives a full sensory experience with soundscapes and music, moments of tranquility, and even scent to help you immerse yourself in the landscapes and practices of these amazing global religions. Thank you very much for your time, and Sushma and I would be very happy to answer any questions that you've popped in the chat, or if you'd like to pop it in the chat now.
Oh, thank you so much, Kajal. That was really wonderful. We've already had a couple of questions. I'm just going to open this up. So the first one is, for the creators of these works, did they expect the works would be cared for and last for centuries, or were some of them intended to wear out and disappear over time? That's a good question. I I can't put myself in the mind of one of these incredible craftspeople, but I think when you make something from stone, the expectation is that it will be taken care of and venerated for a very long time. But that's not to say that all devotional images in these religions are always meant to be permanent, because actually for example, Hindu ritual today, you may well have seen these in action. There is a sacred fire representing the goddess Agni, for example. And that's a temporary fire for a particular ritual, maybe a wedding, you might have seen one. Or other times, Ganesha is represented by, say, a pinch of turmeric, and that is, in present for the duration of that particular ritual, and then it is carefully brushed away. So I think it kind of depends, but I think the expectation is that they were to be cared for. These were sacred devotional images. I've got another question as well. So, from what sort of stone are the sculptures at the Stupa in Amaravati, please? So, it's a lovely, very soft limestone. It's a lovely, pale, creamy kind of color. And so, when Gajal was talking about the damage that was done when it was left out in the rain, it's because the stone is so soft. So, it's lovely because you can carve incredible detail into it. On the other hand, um, it is easily damaged. Ooh, we've got another one. So I'm just going to read out the next one. So the presentation is outstanding. Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. And I can't wait to see the exhibit
Thank
when
you.
I visit from the USA later this year. What is the timeline for this exhibition? When did the idea originate? How long did it take to put the concept together? To get the go ahead to do it, and how long did it take to obtain sculptures, etc., and then start designing the exhibition, writing the interpretive copy, drafting the book, etc.? Well, we actually had about 2 years to do this exhibition, which is not a massively long time. So my co-author and I, Suresh Kumar Muthukumaran, and I wrote the book in just under a year. And in terms of writing the labels and things, done over a few months. Last autumn is when we started that. Um, when did the idea originate? I suppose, God, I could talk about this for hours, but I'll say very briefly that what I really wanted to do was do something very different from the more traditional exhibitions of South Asia you tend to see, which is one particular religion or one particular region. I really wanted to do a show that brought together some of the oldest continuously practiced religions of the subcontinent and really look at the origins of so much of the imagery, the shared origins of these particular kinds of imagery, um, and kind of showcase it in a way that reflects how we live together and how people would have lived together in the past as well. Just gonna move on. I don't know, Kajal, do you want to read number question 5? What do you reckon?
Yeah. As a child, I remember visiting the groundbreaking show, The Image of Man at the Hayward Gallery, part of the Festival of India in 1982. This was the first time I really became aware of the depth and richness of my Indian heritage. Ancient India Living Traditions is the first UK show since then to explore India's art on such a scale. Why do you think it has taken more than 40 years for a major UK museum to showcase India's art? And were you conscious of the South Asian diaspora and their sense of self-identity as you curated the show? So, juicy question, that one.
That's a good one. I think in terms of conscious of the South Asian diaspora, yes, definitely, because we are both obviously from that South Asian diaspora. And I think for both of us, it was really important to
Mm,
collaborate with other diaspora communities. And in the community advisory panel, there were South Asians, there were East Asians, and in one of the films you'll see is a really good friend of mine, Kim, who is of English and Thai heritage as well. That's the film in the Buddhist section. So we wanted to work with people, um, who are basically practitioners of these faiths and show that these faiths are alive and well even in the UK today, where, as Gajal mentioned, they're part of our shared cultural heritage here. And why it's taken this long, oh, that I don't know. I've
yeah,
only been a curator for about
that's
10
a
years,
tricky
so
one.
yeah, I can't go back 40 years. But there have been, I think, recently incredible exhibitions on South Asia. The one at the Barbican, which Gajra and I both went to see, was absolutely brilliant. And that was on just a few months ago. So maybe we're seeing a resurgence of, new,
Mm,
exceptional, exciting displays on South Asia. And they're curated by South Asians as well. So we bring something
mm,
quite different to the subject, how we put them on, and try and share those stories that underlie them. Like, we're talking about, as Gaju mentioned, the sensory trail. And for that, we actually partnered not only with the Asian People's Disability Alliance in North London, but also one of our international training program fellows who set up a company called Access for All. So Siddhant Shah, who's based in Mumbai. So he was heavily involved in this as well. So I think
mm,
it's been, yeah, really exciting. And I think it's nice to do this kind of talk because you can share more about all the surrounding aspects. So it's not just the
mm.
images on display, it's everything that really underpins that and helps shape what you can see.
The next question, can you
So,
comment on how Buddhism incorporated Hindu deities?
so we actually talk about that a bit more in the book. So I would say, I'm going to pitch our exciting book, which I've conveniently got right next to me here, because we do actually discuss that in a bit more detail there. But just to say that some of the deities we include in the exhibition, they have long been venerated by some members of the Jain and Buddhist communities. Ganesh, for example, Kajal showed Ganesh from Buddhist context. In that display, you'll also see a representation of his father, Shiva, for example. Um, so yeah, they definitely incorporated them, um, but not always in the positive way that you might imagine. In some cases, you've got Buddhist bodhisattvas and deities kind of showing their mastery over some Hindu deities. So yeah, I'd recommend having a look at the book. Could we talk about that a bit more? Um, and were any of the
Mm.
sculptures, etc., found further east, China, Java, etc., made in India and brought there? Or were they generally made locally or regionally? Um, I think both is the answer. In the exhibition, we don't have those sacred images that were made in India and then transported to those regions, but monks, traders, um, practitioners of the different faiths, they certainly took sacred images along with them on these epic journeys. So that definitely took place, and it's also how local artists were kind of, had um, beautiful images to kind of look at, work with as well. Um, may I find
Yeah,
out
sure.
if True. So, may I find out if any of these items are for personal use? Are you found in people's homes on a day-to-day basis, or are they for special occasions? So I, I I'm assuming that you mean the ancient sculptures here. So the larger stone ones are more likely to have been used in, so you can over reflect my hearing, used in places of communal worship, community worship, whereas those smaller terracotta images, which you'll see in the exhibition, are more likely to have been, well, actually, do you know, in lots of ways, we don't really know. Based on archaeological digs and the context that they were found in, they could have been offerings at shrines. They could have been, personal images for personal veneration in the home, for example. Um, and there's an incredible snake panel in the exhibition as well. And that's very similar to lots that you still find placed under trees in towns, in villages as well. So that's more of a community kind of veneration there. So a whole range of different ways.
Shall I read the next question, Sushma?
Go on then. Yeah.
What was the thought behind the different colors for each religion section?
Oh, good question. So actually,
That's a
when
really good question.
we were so lucky to work with brilliant designers, Dean, and when we started working together, we did field trips, and one of the trips was to Neasden Temple, which is, I think many of you may even have visited. It's just in North London, and they've been a wonderfully supportive exhibition organisation for this exhibition. And we were very fortunate. They welcomed us visiting the temple with the designers and the lighting designer to see how important colour is to these religious traditions. And one of my favourite colours is hot pink. You see the cover of the book is hot pink. The Hindu section is hot pink. Lots of my clothes are hot pink. And it was a collaboration with the designers, having visited a lot of these sacred spaces, and choosing colours that best fit these particular sections. So the nature spirits one is shades of green. The Jain section is a lovely serene golden cream color. The Buddhist section is a vibrant orange. The Hindu section is a hot pink, and the Beyond India section is a lovely turquoisey blue, which is supposed to emulate the sky, the huge skies, and the huge bodies of water that the monks and traders would have traveled along to visit all of the different regions
Mhm.
and countries as well.
The next question is, does the exhibition include reference to places like the Ajanta caves, which obviously couldn't be present in the exhibition, but exemplify the way that Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain images and sculptures existed side by side?
Hmm. So I have been asked a lot of questions about, oh, did you include this particular region or this other region? And we haven't been able to include everywhere. We've, focused very closely on the incredible sculptures we have at the museum and some incredible loans from very generous institutions in the UK and abroad, including India. But we haven't included Ajanta caves in the exhibition itself. I'm just trying to remember now, did we discuss that in the book? We may well have done, so I might recommend going to the book again. But in the book and in the show, we definitely reference lots of different sites. Mathura is a really important one, obviously, for early Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist sculpture. But there are also other regions, Ahichatra, Amaravati, Gairaspur, so many regions and places, Eastern India as well. So it's a whole range, and we also extend into, of course, Sri Lanka. There's objects from Afghanistan and Pakistan, as well as all of the incredible regions in East, Southeast, and Central Asia as well. But I think
Think
we've come
that's
to
it,
the
yeah.
end of our questions. So I think with that being said, I just wanted to thank you so much again for joining us, and we very much hope you can visit the exhibition in person. And I've got some information about our next live event on this sheet of paper. So it's the next live event in the public program for adults is the wonderful musician Shumik Datta. The Sarod in concert is on the 27th of June at 6:30 p.m. in person at the museum. And also, please join us on the 18th of July for our late night opening, an evening of workshops and activities organised by the Youth Collective. And details of all of these and many other events are on the website right now, so do sign up. And I'll just say thank you so much from both me and Kajal for joining us this evening. It's been really wonderful, and we've really valued your questions as well. And we look forward to welcoming you very soon to the exhibition. And until then, a lovely and very warm goodbye from us and from the British Museum. Goodbye.
Bye.